Letter 6. The Dera, November 10th, 1932. Dear American fellow students, October 6th at 4 a.m. we left the Dera again for our trip to Rawalpindi and the mountain stations. The journey was made by motor car and was very delightful. Much of the country in the north of the Punjab and in the foothills of the Himalayas is similar to that of the California mountain regions. It makes the writer feel quite at home. Arrival at Rawalpindi. The master stopped in Lahore for a short satsang at 7 o'clock, where several thousand people were waiting for him. We then proceeded northward along a very beautiful highway, much of it being shaded with trees on both sides. We stopped at one village for a short talk from the master to a small bunch of people, and then arrived in Rawalpindi at 2:40. This is a nice little city of about 50,000 people, lying at the very feet of the great Himalaya range and adjacent to the northwestern frontier province. It is an important trading centre. Not far away lies a fertile valley, the seat of an ancient civilization dating back far beyond the beginning of authenticated history. The valley was invaded by Alexander the Great, the Greeks leaving their records, statuary, coins, etc., which have recently been recovered by excavations. This valley was once the bed of a great inland sea, something like the Imperial Valley in California. The Satsang Hall in Rawalpindi. On our arrival in Rawalpindi, we went directly to the new Satsang Hall recently built by Raja Ram, a banker and manufacturing jeweller. Of course, he is a devoted satsangi of our master's fold. The hall cost about 150,000 rupees. At the present time, 1932, the purchasing power of the rupee in this country is fully equal to $1 in America, although the rate of exchange is now close to 4 rupees to the dollar. This hall is a very beautiful structure. The only drawback to it is the fact that it stands in the midst of the city, surrounded by all sorts of buildings. The furniture is modern and excellent. It has just enough of the Oriental in design to add beauty and grace. The master's rooms are delightfully arranged in 2 suites, one on the 3rd floor and the other on the 4th floor. The Satsang Hall, or auditorium, is on the ground floor, but has only limited seating capacity, less than 2,000. At the several meetings held here by our master, this hall was packed, galleries and windows were full, many stood in the streets near the rear entrance, and others filled the main streets in front. The master with his secretary Rai Sahib went to his rooms in the Satsang Hall, while the rest of our party was comfortably quartered in the home of Rajaram and his wife. They are planning, as soon as the master gives consent, to turn over all business to his brothers and come to the Dera to live, building for themselves a new house there. They would thus devote the rest of their lives to spiritual things. A great many satsangis look forward to a complete retirement from worldly affairs and coming to the Dera to devote the remainder of their lives to the master's work. But the master does not encourage or permit this until they have discharged all their worldly responsibilities. At the very first satsang, a great crowd greeted the master. This is a privilege they do not have very often. The early morning satsang was also attended by an immense crowd, and then after satsang and all through the day, numberless individuals and committees sought interviews with the Master. The Great Leper Asylum. After the first morning satsang, this disciple enjoyed a visit to the Great Leper Asylum in this city, one of the best in India or the world. Here, a large number of the victims of this dread malady are cared for. Contrary to popular opinion, the physicians and attendants have no fear of contagion. Here the patients receive the most modern treatment, including chol mugra oil, which was once thought to be a specific cure, but is now considered to be only a help. Many patients making excellent improvement by its use, while others show little improvement. Some are actually cured and discharged, while others remain for life. This is a disease still under scientific investigation and experiment. Many phases of it still elude the investigator. One peculiar feature of leprosy is its very long incubation period, extending from 6 months to 20 years between the time of exposure and the onset of the disease. No certain and definite cure has been developed thus far. Most cases are self-terminating, and leprosy itself seldom ever kills. There is practically no suffering with it, even though fingers and toes may be lost. The patients in this institution seemed quite cheerful, and the management deserves much credit for the kind and efficient service they are giving to many unfortunate men and women afflicted with this disease. Climbing the mountains. After a few days in Rawalpindi, we started for the mountains at 5 a.m. on the 12th. Presently, we found ourselves driving along over a good road built by our Master himself over 30 years ago, while he was in government service. That fact, together with the increasing beauty of the scenery, added zest to the trip. Just after dawn, while the Master waited for the second car to overtake us, this disciple decided to walk on alone, as the air was now quite chilly and the exercise would do him good. Anyway, he wanted to walk a little distance over the road his Master had built. We are now actually in the foothills of the majestic old Himalayas, but their snowy peaks lie yet 100 miles or more to the north. The air is already lighter and cooler. The traveller begins to feel a sense of exhilaration, also of deep peace, so characteristic of these inspiring old hills. Finally, just as the sun rose over the mountain tops, pouring a flood of gold down the valley, the Master himself came along and picked me up in his car. We began the long climb up the slow grades. At 8:30 we stopped at Ahmedabad, a small mountain town, and took breakfast. Several scores of devoted disciples of the Master greeted him here, and among them were a goodly number who had worked with him in the old days. Their love for him was quite manifest. The writer was served with a breakfast of rice, warm goat's milk, dates, grapes, and pears. The journey was then continued 4 miles further in the car, at which point we mounted horses for the remainder of the trip, the climb of 14 miles further up to Galabag. This was by order of the Master. As he said, our party could better enjoy the scenery that way. But some of us suspected that the Master did not deem the motor trip up the steep mountain grades altogether safe. The road is barely wide enough for the car, and many are the sharp turns, with a yawning precipice of from 100 to 1,000 feet straight down below. The grades are very steep. Some of them are apparently 20 to 30%. It was not built for automobiles. All of this road was built by our master, and it is a masterpiece of construction work. Much of it is cut out of the solid rock in the mountainside. The ascent was indeed a pleasure rarely enjoyed. A little over halfway up, we paused at a watering place prepared by our beloved master, so that all travellers over this way, whether man or beast, might drink the purest of cold water. We are climbing rapidly. The more or less desolate and barren mountains of the lower altitudes now give place to pine-covered peaks that tower above deep and colourful gorges. Rich undergrowth abounds. Ferns and wild roses and daisies and a few scattering violets cover the slopes. The air grows lighter. Our ears tell us that we are in higher altitudes than usual. 3 miles below our stopping place, a group of 15 men met the master, a committee who had come on foot that far to welcome him. This committee grew to 100 or more by the time we reached the end of our journey. These mountaineers easily kept pace with our horses up the steep grades, mile after mile. In fact, some of our own party did the same thing, walking the whole of the 14 miles. The master sat majestically on a spirited young horse, erect and princely as any Raja, the picture of grace and dignity as we climbed the steep grades. Many were the times in years long gone by that he had made this same ascent. He is quite at home in the mountains, either on foot or on horseback. Gulabag, the Black Forest. We rest in Gulabag. The name means black park or forest. It has a small British population connected with a military establishment. The town lies on the mountain slopes at an altitude of between 8,000 and 9,000 feet above sea level. The scenery is beautiful, some of it really grand. We unpack our luggage at last in one of the most sacred spots in this region, or in all of the Himalayas, a little stone house built by our master and still belonging to him. It has to be approached on foot for some distance. It stands on a point of jutting rocks at the very brink of an almost perpendicular precipice, 2,000 feet in height. From the edge of the stone-rimmed little yard in front of the house, one can look almost straight down for nearly half a mile, and at the bottom of the gorge runs a little stream of water, looking like a silver thread through the purple shadows. Sitting 10 feet from the stone wall of the yard, it appears as if the yard and house were suspended in mid-air. To get a little clearer view of the situation, if one stands on the crest of the mountain above the little town of Gulabag and looks southward, he will observe a valley, many miles long east and west, something like a mile wide. The walls of this rise to a height of probably 3,000 feet above the floor of the valley, and right in the midst of this valley, rising abruptly from its floor, is a ridge about 2,000 feet in height. This ridge is connected with the north wall by another ridge, something like the crossbar of the capital letter T. Over this cross ridge, we have access to the great central ridge and to the master's house, which stands on the extreme eastern promontory of that ridge. Looking away across the valley in any direction, one may observe what appear to be stair steps on the mountain slopes. They are little gardens made by digging into the mountain sides, one above the other, and thus levelling little strips of ground upon which these mountaineers raise their vegetables. The houses are made by digging into the mountainsides, extending the roof outward, and then covering it with dirt and gravel. In the winter time, these little houses are often covered with 10 to 18 feet of snow. They are frequently abandoned at that time of the year, and the inhabitants go down to lower altitudes until the return of spring weather. Morning dawn in the Himalayas. October 13th. It is now early dawn. We stand upon the rock-rimmed heights overlooking the deep gorge. 2,000 feet below us, the lingering shadows hold everything in their dark embrace. But far above us, the sun begins to cast a roseate glow over the mountains. The poet Burton wrote, "The highlands catch yon orient gleam, while purpling still the lowlands lie, and pearly mists, the morning pride, soar incense-like to greet the sky." At last its dazzling rim looks over the tops of the distant pines, and a new day is born. We could fancy that Shakespeare, escaped from his dull and foggy island, stood on these heights when he exclaimed, "But look, the morn in russet mantle clad walks o'er the dew of yon high eastern hill." The scene is altogether enchanting. No words can describe it, and no mortal artist could paint it. The hush of solemn grandeur adds to the spiritual inspiration of the place and the hour. It is the sacred hour of the Mahatma. It is the holy hour of divine worship, and none the less sacred because the call to worship is in a temple not made by hands. Its walls are the mountains, and its dome the sky, and the light of the sun points to the worlds of light within. One instinctively thinks of the old yogi morning salutation to the giver of all life. Hail, hail, to him alone, who is the one, the primal, pure, eternal, immortal, and immutable in all ages. For 100,000 years and more, these mountain trails and windswept pines have frequently heard this salutation. Here men have long sought to unravel the deep mysteries of God and of the soul, and here the disciples of the living Master still seek the calm retreat that enables them the better to meditate upon the holy path. Here many a soul, struggling upward, striving to rise above the dark chasms of mind and matter, has found the light eternal. As this American stood upon the jutting rocks close by the side of the dear Master, and looked into the dark valley below, he instinctively prayed that he might some day be permitted to stand by the side of this same gracious deliverer upon the radiant heights of Sachkhand. He longs with an inexpressible yearning for release from the dense and chilling fogs of the spiritual lowlands. Too long he has groped his uncertain way through the dark and poisoned atmosphere of ignorance and passion. Gracious Master, open to us the gates of light. Satsang in the mountains. At 10 o'clock, the disciples sat in the little yard by the Master, enjoying the welcome sunbeams, and listening to the great teacher as he talked to a group of old mountaineers. All satsangis now, literally worshipping the Master. Some of them had worked with him in government service, 30 or 40 years ago. But to them all, now he is the great Mahatma. They lovingly address him as Maharajji. This means something like, very great and honoured sir, though I think there is no exact English equivalent. One old man could scarcely talk from excess of emotion, as he gazed lovingly at the master and asked many questions. It had been several years since he had seen the master. 1 o'clock and the master rests, but the silent worshippers continue to gather in the yard. A group of women sit around the rim of the yard, waiting patiently for the master to come out. One by one, others quietly join them. Old men, bent over their canes, come 1 or 2 at a time, having laboriously climbed the steep trails in order to sit at the master's feet. Satsang was held at 2 o'clock on a small level area just above the little stone house. About 400 had gathered to see and hear their adored Sadguru. These mountain folk are a sturdy people, many of them having descended from tribes who lived by marauding and highway banditry. They now live in an atmosphere of spiritual peace and of steadfast devotion to Maharajji, for whom they would readily lay down their lives. The Master, a mountain climber. After satsang, just as the sun sets behind the distant purple hills, we all follow the Master for a little walk and climb over the hills westward along the crest of the ridge. He inspects a proposed site for a new satsang hall, which may be built by next year. The ground has been purchased for it. While some of the middle-aged members of our party pause for breath and hesitate as they climb the steep trails, the Master steadily climbs with firm, unfaltering step. And when the summit is reached, he shows not the slightest signs of fatigue. Talking and laughing, he is king of mountain and valley alike. He is always master in every sense of the word. His quick wit, keen intelligence, and physical vigour are quite astounding in one of his patriarchal appearance. Teaching the children. October 14th at 8 a.m. The Master has 23 children, sons and daughters of satsangis, seated in a semicircle in the yard, and he is teaching them the position in which to sit and listen to the sound current. They are not given the names, but instructed in this way, they can better join with their parents during the hours of meditation. He says many of them will come to hear the sound current before the time comes for the regular initiation. The Master compares little children to blank paper, clean and white, nothing in the way to obstruct their upward progress, and so they quite easily come in touch with the sound current and the upper worlds. It is only when the minds of the older people are filled with the filth and illusions of the world that it becomes difficult for them to approach the higher regions. Leaving the mountains. It is a little late in the season for this altitude. The nights are cold. Sudden wind and hailstorms sweep over the region almost daily now, and so we must leave before we are overtaken by a snowstorm. On October 18th, we descended to Ahmedabad, a charming little military station. This is one of the extreme outpost stations of the British military forces in the northwestern frontier province. It is not far from the famous Khyber Pass, the entrance to Afghanistan. Here the master held satsang for 3 days and, as usual, was greeted by hundreds of enthusiastic satsangis and others. There seems to be no remote corner of jungle or plain in all of northwestern India where our master is not known and loved. Time and again, as we travelled over far stretches of country, we were met by groups of men and women waiting for him by the roadside. In many remote villages, he paused for a short satsang where scores and hundreds of enthusiastic disciples welcomed him. In one mountain town, the master was greeted by more than 1,000 people. Here came also the Sikhs, creating disturbance, advancing their old argument against a living guru. In this town, we visited a place made sacred to our master and all satsangis by a visit from Baba Jemal Singh, holding satsang here back in the 90s. The Taxila Museum and Buddhism. Our next stop was at Taxila, where is situated a government museum containing many relics of the long ago, recovered from buried cities nearby, pottery, gold and silver ornaments, silver vessels, coins, Greek and Buddhist statues. This disciple, visiting the place as he did in the company of our own adored master, took particular notice of the large number of statues depicting the Buddha in attitudes of spiritual meditation. The making of statues has always been a favourite method of manifesting devotion by the Buddhist disciples. Here again, we are forcibly brought face to face with another historical phase of old world religions, namely that of the inevitable tendency to externalize the religion and to forget its spiritual content. We were also reminded of the way men and things grow sacred in the public eye by the lapse of time, while they completely ignore the real gods, the living masters who walk in their midst today. One is reminded of the familiar couplet regarding the great Greek poet, through which the living Homer begged his bread. 7 cities claimed great Homer dead. Here in the Museum of Ancient Relics are scores of statues of the immortal Buddha, which, after the lapse of 26 centuries, hundreds of millions of men hold sacred, and yet there are, we believe, men who have reached a degree of spiritual enlightenment above and beyond that attained by the Buddha while he was on earth. This we say, not to minimize his attainments, nor to detract from his sacred character, for in our hearts we bow and praise him forever. We say this rather to encourage the living disciples. Besides our great master, we have a large number in the Dera satsang who already have gone very high in the spiritual regions, for that also is well known here among us by the grace of our master. Others are reaching those heights all of the time, and you and I are expected to reach them not in some future age or in the next or 4th incarnation, but here and now. If Buddhists were to honour their Lord by taking up the course of development under a living master, it would not be long until they could meet and talk personally with their beloved Prince in his present home. As this letter has already grown too long, I must bid you goodbye, wishing you all the blessing and love of the Father. Your brother at his holy feet, Julian P. Johnson.